And we're live. How's it going, Mariam?
Yeah, it's going well. How are you guys? Welcome to London.
Thank you.
So it's actually my first time.
Oh, yeah.
Is it really?
It is, yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting.
I've gone through London a couple times, but I've never actually been stayed here. So, and I don't usually count work trips either. So I don't.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's a
I
good
don't-
habit.
I feel like this whole week's so jam packed. So I don't think I'll be able to do much of anything.
Yeah, I feel like counting work trips is the same as counting that you went to a country if it was like a layover.
Yeah.
Right? Like you didn't really go there. You just went to the airport.
Well, yeah, the airport or the hotel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or the
Exactly.
Airbnb in this case, I guess. So.
Yeah, but I feel like there's a lot going on this week with Muslim Tech Week, but I feel like if you can fit in a couple of touristy things,
Yeah.
London's a really great city to explore.
What would you recommend?
Oh, okay. My recommendations are all food-based,
Okay.
to be completely honest.
That's great.
We like
love
that,
food,
actually.
especially-
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The food scene here is actually really good. I'm originally from New York City, so I'm very picky about food. And I generally was like, oh, London's not that good, but the food scene has really stepped up. There's some really great markets like Borough Market or Broadway Market where you can kind of try a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
That's like one of the unique things about London is you can there's a lot of walking. But then you get snacks in between.
But you're from New York, so this is like a very easy transition,
It
right?
actually is,
So-
yeah. I think considering people are always like, oh, it's so brave that you moved to a new country without knowing anyone. But I was like, it's very similar. It's like the same city in a different font.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the food scene in London is honestly well rated, in my opinion. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think it's overrated. It is perfectly hyped. I love the food scene in New York, and many people don't know, but Dallas was labeled as like the biggest food city on Bon Appetit about 2 years ago.
Oh, no way.
So it's grown, it's matured, but the halal food market in London is obviously second to none.
Oh, yeah.
I think Toronto is pretty up there, at least in terms of like halal options. But
Yeah.
here in London, I've been like so impressed by all the diversity of food, but also the quality that you're able to get. But yeah, so it's definitely a great city to be. I've been in London before for about 2 weeks, a few years ago.
Oh, nice.
And I think that's when I probably fell in love with London for the first time. But yeah, I'm definitely glad to be back here, especially for Muslim Tech Week. So
yeah. And you guys picked a good week to come as well because the weather is really nice, which is very rare.
okay. Is it usually like Seattle?
Yeah,
Very
that's a good way to
rainy?
describe
Okay.
it. Just very gray vibes. I mean, even now today it's beautifully sunny, but it might start raining all of a sudden. So just like
Okay,
keep
be
an umbrella on you. You
Good to
never
know.
know. Yeah.
I don't have that umbrella.
London has
Yeah.
definitely given me trust issues if I didn't already have them.
Yeah, we're from Dallas, Texas, and over there, I mean, it's like literally the day might start at like 40 degrees or 30 degrees and then end
Yeah.
at like 75, 80.
Oh, really? I
Sometimes
didn't know
even
that.
40
close to
degree
100.
swings. Yeah.
Sometimes even I'll just end up at 100. Yes, that's really like, talk about trust issues there.
Yeah.
So your outfit has to be very well diverse.
Okay,
you
so
know?
yeah, so then you're ready for London. I actually haven't been to Dallas yet. I
Okay.
really want to go.
Yeah,
Come
if you,
through.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
ever come through, we got to take you to this awesome barbecue spot.
Yeah, well, I love barbecue.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is one thing we're missing out on here in London. Oh, and Mexican food as well. We don't have that.
Fair enough. Well, I'll give two shout outs, Yerby's Barbecue and Talking Tacos. I'd probably say Yerby's Barbecue is
Oh, man.
just got rated in the top 50 in Dallas for Texas Monthly.
Yeah, they're amazing. Amazing halal
Incredible.
barbecue. Yeah.
We'll actually have them as a guest later this year.
Oh,
so
no
really
way.
pumped. It's also Muslim owned. And then Talking Tacos is also a fully halal like Mexican cuisine, and it is really well branded. The food portions are fantastic. You've been, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But good spots to be. But yeah,
Naveed's our resident foodie because, yeah.
I worked at a sushi restaurant for about like 4 or 5 months, like a few
No
years ago,
way.
and that was like my open door to like the restaurant industry, like what chef works where, and it made me appreciate food way more
Yeah.
than just as a consumer.
Yeah,
if that makes
absolutely.
sense, right? Anyway, I want to get started with a brief introduction on
Sure.
you. And so we are with Mariam from Menza.AI, who got accepted to YC of 2023. That's amazing. Extremely competitive to get into Y Combinator. Now, did you apply when you were in the US or did you apply while you were living in London?
No, so I've been in the UK for almost 8 years now.
Whoa.
Yeah, so originally from New York City, born and raised, and then moved here for my undergrad. And that's where I met my now co-founder, but I actually worked in finance for a few years first.
Okay.
And then, yeah, back in 2023, it was all very sudden. So my co-founder, he'd previously run a tech startup. We worked together on that. That's how we met. And then he had a successful exit back in 2021, and then was kind of figuring out what he wanted to do next. And in 2023, he was like, hey, how's work going? And I was like, yeah, pretty good. And he's like, yeah, but like, would you quit your job and work as my co-founder on a new idea? And it was just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was about the time we got into YC as well. So we were very much like pre-idea, or like just had like a very small MVP to apply to YC with. And we were like, if we're going to do it this time. So the first company was completely bootstrapped. We were students in university doing it. And now we're like, okay, we're going to go big or go home. We'll just apply to YC. Odds are we won't get in. But if we do, that would be awesome. And then we did. And then we were like, oh, shoot, I had to quit my job. I was still employed at my company here in London. We had to move to California. So I think my last day of my job was Friday. Saturday, I flew out. And I think it's such a long flight. So it basically took the whole day. And then Sunday was our first day of full-time Menza, full-time YC. And that was kind of it. We were in the deep end.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome.
Wow.
So I guess I have so many questions, but before we maybe get to like Menza, I want to understand a little bit more about this previous startup and what was kind of the industry vertical there. How did you work with this other co-founder that ended up becoming your co-founder for the next venture? Maybe give us a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah. So Qasim Munier, who's my now co-founder, he was the solo founder of this company called Shortly. And we met back in 2018. I was in my first year of university. I was looking for, in London, and I was looking for internship opportunities. And I was kind of struggling because when you're in your first year, people don't really want you to touch their stuff or make any significant changes. It's very much like shadowing. So I really wanted to work with a startup so I could get more hands-on experience. And when I met Qasim, he was super keen to just let me jump in. I was studying computer science. He didn't really come from a technical background. He was a medical student actually at the same university. And we met through, there's this entrepreneurship institute at our university. So they fund about 20 different startups from across the university, both current students, alums, professors. And so Qasim was one of those students. And so we actually were connected through that. The university paid me like minimum wage part-time to work with him. So it was great for him because he got a free intern.
Right.
And then it was great for me because I was like, could basically eat meal deals and survive for that summer. But then I got really great work experience, and we ended up working like just insane hours, just having a lot of fun. So Shortly essentially was an app to help you read short stories. And so we would scrape short stories off of the internet on Reddit, and we would optimize for your reading speed. So we do a little test when you first get the app, figure out your reading speed, and then let's say you have 12 minutes on your commute. We give you a story that's 12 minutes long based on your reading speed. And then we started to play around with the idea of like, what if people could actually write stories on the app? And so we created like a writing studio. And then we were like, okay, what if people could use AI to write stories using the app?
What time frame was this?
This was
like the AI portion specifically.
Yeah, so this was like 2018, summer of 2018.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. And this was
I mean, it's hard to say AI is early because it's been around for like 50, 60 years, but like in terms of like a commercialized product, only in the last 3-4 years have really people been talking about. So that's kind of relatively like right on the market timing of like when you're like a little bit ahead, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that was like now co-founder Qasim, and he was the solo founder, right? And he was just, he's kind of like a Willy Wonka type character, I have to say. Like sometimes
we gotta bring him on. We gotta bring him on.
That's a great way to describe your co-founder. By the way.
No, honestly,
that is a compliment. I just want to make it very
clear.
He's
got a golden ticket.
It's absolutely a compliment. Like I felt like I got the golden ticket when I was working with him because we got assigned to work with each other.
Yeah.
And he was just someone who was really thinking outside of the box.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna tell a story, but he's gonna, if he ever hears this, he's gonna be like, I absolutely did not do that. When we first met and had our first meeting, he had his student ID card and he just like chucked it at me.
This is your first introduction.
This is our first introduction. And I was like, what? Just like flew past my head. And he's like, yeah, I'm really into card throwing these days. Because he's that kind of person who like has these quirky little, And
Could
that
you
was
imagine
like,
doing that in Texas?
no.
Oh, you might get shot.
Yeah. Or you get sued or something. Like it's kind of like employee abuse, but
Yeah.
now we obviously don't do that at Menza. But,
No, of course not.
yeah, but I feel like that's such a testament to his character. Is he's someone who gets really passionate about things and goes all in. And so card throwing was a thing. Like he was doing like different magic tricks and stuff that summer. And then I got super into it. We started playing poker as well. So we'd have like these late night, very halal poker games with some of the other founders on the in the program. Anyways, that's a kind of introduction to Qasim. Yeah. But he was like, yeah, we could use AI to write stories. And I was like, what the heck? No way. I study computer science. I can tell you, there's no way you can do that with AI. That's so like, that's so beyond what 2 university students could be working on. And then Qasim really kept that going. And, what I really learned from him in that summer was going to our customers first and like really understanding. And there was this thing of like, the biggest challenge a lot of our customers had was knowing what to write about or getting started. And we're like, okay, writer's block. And that's when the AI thing kind of came up.
Got it.
And so then, he kept working on it, and Qasim's one of those people who will like DM anyone. And so I think at some point, OpenAI was working on their like robotic arms at that time, but they had this LLM project happening in the background, but it wasn't like a priority. And so he DM'd Greg Brockman and was like, can we get access to this GPT? And I think it was 1 or 2 or the beta version. And so then, we implemented it onto the platform. And so shortly became one of the first commercial large language model companies.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was back in like 2019, 2020, and then exited to Jasper.AI, if you're familiar. Jasper's from Texas as well.
Austin based.
Yeah, exactly. So they were kind of at their high back in 2021 when Qasim exited to them. Then he was kind of figuring out what the next steps were. But it was so cool to kind of see LLMs way back then.
Yeah.
And then when, November 2022 came out, ChatGPT came out, and we saw what was happening with large language models. We were like, oh, we've been in the space for a long time.
Right.
And like Qasim has built this kind of background as like a large language model master. I've now experienced what it's like to work on the enterprise side. Is there a way we can think about using large language models in B2B based on our own experiences of running this smaller startup? And then what were the challenges that I had at the enterprise level that was, kind of across both? And where do we think large language models could fit in? And that's when we kind of came up with this data analysis thing, because what I found when I was working at Goldman was that, I was working with a lot of non-technical people. Even though I came from a computer science background, I ended up working on the trading floor. And so while people were technical in one way, it wasn't necessarily that they knew how to code or how to work with data. And so I found that we often were making decisions without looking at the data first, which is kind of crazy to me, to be one of like the world's top investment banks and to go into customer conversations and not know what they were trading or how their trades were performing necessarily. And so I was an analyst, and I was building out these reports, and I could see the tangible impact that had. But there were really these issues of whether it was skill set or just how data is siloed and fragmented in these organizations, or even just making it more accessible in terms of like being able to ask things quickly, figure them out quickly. This was an issue that we had. And then we had the same issue at Shortly, because we were collecting all this consumer data from our users, and we didn't have a data background. So we didn't really know, again, we were technical, but not in that way. And so we didn't know how to make better data-driven decisions, if there were insights we were missing out on. And so that's kind of where like, okay, here's the idea. And then we really just made a very basic version of the product, did YC. YC was really good at pushing us to launch very quickly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was,
as they should be.
As they should be. To the point where I was like, from the outside, I'm like, you could definitely launch quickly. But when you're actually putting something out there.
When you start like working on what you consider your baby, it's like, it has to be your your artistic abilities start coming in, right? Like the perfectionist versus, there's like this quote that I always go to when I talk to different founders. It's like, if you haven't pushed your product to market quick enough, and you think that there's some issues with it, or like it's like you're trying to chase this concept of perfection, then you're too late. Like you need to push something that you're not happy with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you just need to learn from the experience, test your assumptions, and just keep pivoting. And that's like the biggest thing.
And like what may be
the framework, right?
And what maybe your prioritization as a founder could be very different with a market's prioritization of what needs to be done with a product, right? So sometimes
it usually is, to be quite honest.
Yeah. So sometimes you may be fixing the wrong problem when customers may not be caring about that problem that you think is a really big deal, right? So, and that's wasting time, which is not ideal. One thing I want to dial back on is you had this, when Qasim was talking about this idea, who's not technical and you're the technical person and you're thinking in that no way mindset. How did no way become it's possible?
Yeah, I think so. At the time, Qasim was non-technical. He's a self-taught coder, and now he's super technical. But I think what's nice is I was learning everything in a university framework and kind of like what I was learning in class. And that, I was told these things of like, this is what's possible and these are the things we need. I was overthinking essentially. And I think there's something so beautiful when people don't necessarily have that and they're not necessarily taught in the traditional way. And then they can kind of expand their minds a little bit more and be like, okay, but like, what if, you know, and like they're willing to take those risks in a way. And I think that was what made us such good partners back then and makes us such good partners now, because we both have very different ways of thinking. And I think I am a little bit more of the like pessimist, I guess, and he's a little bit more of the dreamer, which is the classic like CTO, CEO, kind of interaction. But I think that was the thing of like, that's what I appreciate so much. My co-founder is how he thinks in that way. And that's why when, I quit my job at Goldman, I didn't know what we were going to work on necessarily, but I knew that no matter what, I had so much to learn from him and the way that he thinks. And for him, I think it was very much like there was no one else he saw as a potential co-founder because of how well we worked together previously and how we have such complementary skill sets. Very much, if I don't like doing something, he's excellent at it. If there's something he does not like doing, I love doing it. And it's something that I'm very happy to do. And so we can kind of get everything covered for the most part. There are certain things we both mutually do not like doing. And now we have an amazing founding engineer who's taken on a lot of that. Shout out to Saban. But yeah, that's it's been a really nice dynamic in that sense.
So quitting your job is not a easy thing to do. Are you Desi or?
I am Desi. Yeah, okay. I'm half Indian, half Pakistani.
Okay, so how old were you when you were quitting your job?
I was 25.
You're 25 years old. How did your parents feel about you doing all of this?
That's a great question. And that's literally, so I always joke about this. When Qasim first came to me about quitting and joining him as a co-founder, my immediate response was to say absolutely yes. But I was like, let me play it cool and not say yes yet. And then I went home and I called my board, aka my parents, and they were like the first call I made. And I was like, okay, guys, so I have this amazing job that I worked so hard for and that I'm doing really well at, and I have an amazing boss and I have a clear forward. And you're all very proud of me. And, it's great for my mom to tell the aunties what I'm doing. But what if I quit my job? And they were so supportive. Incredibly.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What's great is they'd met Qasim as well because we'd been such great friends. And he'd come to New York at some point. So they knew him, they knew how we worked well together. And they also knew me and kind of some of the frustrations I was having in terms of feeling like I was ready for a bigger challenge and really kind of struggling with being in a large corporate where there was a hierarchy and feeling a little bit stifled in my growth. And so they were like, you know what, this is the time in your life. You're 25, you're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage. You can do anything you want, take this risk. You don't want to look back and be like, what if, right? And they were like, we're here to support you if you need us to. But at the end of the day, we believe in you and we think it's going to be great. And places like Goldman will always be there. So at least, do Y Combinator. That'll be amazing. Just take the leap, see what happens. If it's 3 months, it's 3 months. It's not the end of the world. And yeah, they are still so supportive to this day. Maybe they don't necessarily know what I'm doing all the time. But just they're always there to cheer me on. And I'm really, really fortunate to have parents who, and it's interesting because our family we're not necessarily entrepreneurs in the traditional sense. Everyone has quite a corporate job. And we are, really value security and kind of not taking major risks. So it was very refreshing to kind of have them be super supportive in that way.
Were you surprised?
I think so. Yeah, I was a bit surprised. I'm very conservative in terms of I'm very risk averse. And so becoming a founder was just like the biggest wild card of all time. I say that, but I keep making decisions in my life that are kind of insane, like moving to London and like that don't really align with being very risk averse, but I am. And
Imagine if you weren't.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
I know, it would be terrifying.
Be building rockets or something.
Yeah, honestly, maybe that's where I'm limited slightly. But yeah, it was so nice to just have confirmation from them that this is, because I'm very close to my parents. We talk all the time. I maybe overshare with my parents quite a bit, and so they know me better than anyone else.
That's amazing.
And to have them kind of go, yes, your instinct is based on something real, and from their experience, they were like, this is something you will not regret. That was super helpful.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have 2 younger brothers.
How is that, being the oldest sister, like them looking up to you and kind of going in this journey?
Yeah.
How's that relationship been like?
Yeah, it's been really great. You would think they would be like, look up to me. I don't know if they do. I love my brothers a lot. But I've always been like, I'm very much the third parent. I consider myself the third parent.
Of course.
Usually the oldest is.
Yeah, I'm still like the oldest sister, immigrant family, like classic. And I totally fit that stereotype. And like, I'm very involved in their careers and schooling and everything. And like with both my brothers, I was like, study computer science. It is a super employable degree. You can do anything. And of course, one of them goes and studies classics. The other one is like figuring it out, something between economics and guitar. So we're like a totally
Let's
different.
go.
Yeah, I know. They're very cool.
No, it's I laugh only because I have the same exact experience with my brothers.
Yeah,
I'm the oldest as well, and it's like a whole. It's like you obviously like want the best, but sometimes you just gotta find their own way.
Yeah, exactly. Like I found out my brother was applying to finance internships, right? And like this was through my mom. He didn't even tell me directly.
I've got Goldman Sachs.
Yeah. Well, he was like buying a book on like tips and guides to applying to finance internships. And I was like, or you could ask me, like not to be, but like I have random kids email me all the time for advice on, applying to this stuff. And I'm so happy to give, but I'm like, of course my younger brothers, I'm like, why are you spending money on a book? I can just tell you or like connect you to people. I don't know. I really want my brothers to be my kids.
You said
I like you caught yourself. You caught yourself. And you said you didn't want us to cut anything.
Yeah, no, like, you don't have to cut that. Wow.
That's so funny.
I'm very happy for my
That's
brothers.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm very happy for them to be Nepo babies. That's honestly, like, and my kids, inshallah, as well.
Inshallah.
But I'm like, until I have kids, my brothers are my kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the only reason I want to be successful in life is so my brothers don't have to worry. They can be, a classicist and a guitarist and, be Nepo babies and get whatever they want.
Well, as a younger sibling, thank you for both of your services.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously this is a lot is going on, right? You're making this decision to leave your company, join on this exciting adventure. Were you thinking about, what if this goes like completely haywire? If it doesn't work out, are you already kind of thinking about a plan B at all, or are you just kind of all in onto plan A?
Yeah, great question. So for context, when I worked at Goldman Sachs, I worked in the hedging business. So I've always been a big hedger. Like, I think that was why I liked my job there so much was thinking about risks and how to mitigate them.
Yeah.
So I always had I had plan A through Z. Obviously, I would hope the company would go well. But then also when I quit, I was really nice to everyone, like super nice to everyone, just in case. And then, there were other things at some point, I've always wanted to be a VC and to become an investor. And I was like, okay, this is a great way to get experience as an operator. So that could help. So it was more like long-term things like that. But definitely thinking through, okay, what might happen? I'm like that all the time. Even we're now 2 years into our company. Things are going pretty well. But I'm always like, okay, but just think about all of the things that could happen. Or like, even with our company, I think through potential risks constantly. And, if this doesn't go this way, what are we going to do next? And things like that. I don't spend too much time or active time on it because I think that can distract from the main goal. But just, I think having something in the back of your mind of like knowing where you might go next, because not everything turns out the way you want it to. You can be as well planned as possible. You can have everything in your favor, but things like luck, for example, we see so many companies historically that have failed doing the right product, but just at the wrong time, or it's the messaging was slightly off, or who knows really. And I actually, this is like a separate thing, but one of my favorite things to do is to talk to founders who consider themselves to have failed. because I don't think those are failures, right? When you talk to really successful founders, like I've even heard from Brian Chesky, for example, sometimes he is like, I don't really know what happened for us to get to this point, right? They can guess, but they don't really know what went right. Whereas when things go wrong, you know what went wrong. You are like, that's all you think about. You know, you can pinpoint it, you do the autopsy and you really figure out, okay, this is what went wrong. And it's helpful to hear that perspective. And so I don't know. I just think it's interesting just to like think of, okay, what could go wrong? How would I handle it? But also still stay focused. It's a lot of just like splitting your mind into a bunch of different directions.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, there's a couple of things you said that is kind of interesting to me. One is about risk averse. And surprisingly, like you're the second founder that we've had on that has said exactly this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, I'm a very risk averse person. And literally Naveed's like, what? Like, we're just starting a startup. Like, this is probably one of the most riskiest things you can do.
It's the most halal gambling bet
that
you can do.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that you say that, but maybe it's maybe we're not framing it the right way. Like maybe it's the risk averse like framework is maybe framing it as being able to anticipate what are risks so that you can get to like a realistic probability of what success looks like in the shortest amount of time, like, so you can get some quicker validations. Maybe that's what it is more than like clearly you're very risky if you left your job.
Yeah.
But maybe our definitions are a little bit different.
Wait,
I don't know.
I love that. I feel like you're teaching me something about myself right now. This is like a therapy session.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Great.
definitely not a therapist.
Yeah.
We just open up another niche then for us.
No, but like I think that's interesting, right? Because like I think like that's a problem that I see a lot of founders face is they've got these massive visions and it's cool and you do have to have like your playbook of like what do you want like your book to be, like your vision, but a lot of founders I talk to, they struggle with like the first chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 of their story, and they don't know how to niche down and focus. And so like if maybe like this concept of being quote unquote risk averse is really more about like, okay, how can I quickly validate that this is something real?
Yeah.
Right. Which like, like the common Eric Lies MVP, like same thing like that they're teaching in YC, like, let's just go push out a product. Let's hear feedback. Let's like move quickly, into what's real. I think it's, anyways, that's just a little
no, it's
thought.
so interesting because as you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, how have the decisions I've made in my company reflected, that kind of thinking and behavior? And I do think that is something that I would say is, I don't know if it's a point of pride, but it's a way of running my company that I feel like is very much like my focus is, trying to do things as quickly as possible so we can fail as quickly as possible so that we can move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you're definitely taught in startup advice. And I think it's really hard to do yourself.
Oh, extremely.
But then for me, it's kind of like, I don't know. I find that really motivating. And I know I've taken a risk by doing this. So I want to make the most of it. And so I'm always keen to take on new challenges and kind of like go to the fullest with this rather than people very rarely treat their startups like a side project, I guess. But, I feel like it's very much my like thing, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. And I mean, the other thing is like, you kind of want to start building, like the analogy that I'll use is like maybe building a home, right? Like you want to lay the foundation first. And if you've never built a home before, like you have to like go through, there's so many layers to it. So you just like slowly lay the foundation and before you lay the foundation, oh crap, I need to like have the piping and stuff like that. So like I think like there's a lot of these factors that you just have to do small versions of, quickly validate, make yourself feel more comfortable and confident. But it's just crazy because like I feel like every like one of our background, like I guess Muslim background, it's like you gotta be a lawyer, you gotta be a doctor, you gotta be an engineer.
Absolutely.
So like we're just like kind of just engraved in our head, like we have to find a way to prove this to others that we're doing something for real.
Absolutely.
I think one thing that's kind of coming to my mind right now, and I'm going to talk like this because this is way more comfortable, but one thing that's coming to my mind right now is, for example, defining things, right? Like when we're talking about risk, what is it the fear of failing? And even then, what is that defined as, right? Because one founder that we spoke with who said something that I thought was just so monumental and is like forever ingrained in my mind, because when he quit his job, he had a family, he had his first child was about to be born. So there's a lot of these factors of fear or things that would stop him. But one thing that he said that resonated with me was just putting your trust in Allah and doing it. And just that alone is really the success element of it all, is that you're trusting in the process. But what that yields, whether is a successful business or not, that is not really necessarily the definition for him. He was really pinning it on, am I trusting Allah in this journey or am I not? And I think that gave, for me, a lot of confidence in the things I'm going into. It's like, okay, I know I have the skill sets for it. I know I'm able to do this. Yes, I don't know what the end result is financially, but I'm going to trust in that process that I'll get there. And what you wonderfully said is that in this process of these series of wins, or what Brian Chesky was talking about, there's not ever really one key pivotal point. It's more of this orchestra of successes that you kind of get there. And I think that's kind of what you have to rely on. But I think identifying failure points, like where it stops, those are always usually a bit easier to distinguish because you know when it stops.
Yeah.
Right? But when you're winning, you're like, okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
So you're doing so much. Like when you're
Yeah.
quote unquote winning,
Absolutely.
it's just like when you're backs against the wall, you're just constantly like thinking about what to do next. So it's kind of interesting. Like I'm thinking about like some of my own, like when I was like in the grunt of work, it's like you just don't have time to process as much when there's just like so much thing coming at you.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
when there's a roadblock, that's the
Right.
only thing that's on your mind. So it's very
Absolutely.
But yeah,
go ahead. I mean, what you said just reminded me of like when I was training for my Ironman, my coach always said, you're training for 4 events. And an Ironman is a triathlon, right? So running, swimming, and cycling. And I'm like, 4 events. He's like, the 4th is the unknown. Like there's something that's going to go
That's
wrong
interesting.
on that track.
love
And
that.
for me, it was a woman who was riding in front of me and her tire blew and she just wiped out.
God.
And, obviously, when you're going, 15, 20 miles per hour and you're also dead tired, obviously you want to help out. So it's like braking and stopping. Obviously that added to my time, but that was my 4th element, right? Outside of, for some people, it was also in Waco, Texas. So it's 110 degrees and you're dying. But like there is always element that you cannot train for. And I feel like sometimes success could be that 4th element where you're given a lot of opportunities and you need to focus on which one that you need to go into.
Yeah. It's so funny. So much of what you guys were saying really resonated with just like, I had like a little internal reflection. So when we were talking about failure, for example, and you were talking about that other founder and, the trust that he has in Allah at the end of the day, that so resonated with me. And it also kind of made me realize, for me, thinking about what would be a failure with Menza, I think at some point I was like, oh, it's if the company dies. But now I don't think that's how I feel anymore. I think it's more if I feel like I didn't do all that I could at the end of the day. So even if it dies, if I'm like, okay, I got the most out of it and did the most with it. And I do think that's my experience with religion as well.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's hard to say like, this is a failure point. This is a win point. It's more, I just feel like if as long as I try my best and I'm making the most of my experience, then that is a success to me. And that's just part of my journey. And like, I consider the company very much part of the lifelong journey. It's not
Yeah. And it's also, it's the whole idea of, right, tying your camel and putting your trust in Allah, right? And so I think in these situations, it's really letting go some control of what you can control, what you can't control, and being okay with that. But I think, as Muslims, alhamdulillah, I feel like we are given this superpower, which is that we are Muslim, right? And I think we have such a strong way to rely on Allah from a mental perspective in a lot of these hardships that sometimes we overlook. And one of the things that I think is really important in these journeys, whether it be parenthood, entrepreneur, all these roles and hats that we're playing, ultimately we should ask ourselves, is this helping me get closer to Allah? And if so, you're succeeding. So even if your business fails, right? If you can leave that and knowing it grew your relationship with Allah, you have succeeded.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that grounds me in failures because, man, when I'm struggling, I'm like praying to Allah. When these microphones weren't working, this one, like making dua, right? Like all these are opportunities that Allah saying, my servant is still relying upon me, right? And so I think those are good, important parts to ground ourselves on why we're doing this, like the real big reason why. Now, kind of moving into that, you have gone through obviously computer science, and which in my experience, so I did nutrition and comp sci, so weird hybrid, I know.
Oh, cool. I love that.
So what I'm curious on is that a lot, in my experience, when I met a lot of, comp sci students in my era, it was kind of a traditional path, right? Did you ever envision yourself becoming an entrepreneur or going in this route that you are of like a leadership role, all these things, or was that kind of like a surprise to you that came your way?
Oh, such a surprise. I don't even today, I'm like, what? I'm a founder? That's crazy. Because I never, again, the risk aversion and to be honest, initially when I was like 17 and deciding, what kind of career I wanted, I went full stereotype and wanted to be a doctor. So I was initially pre-med and then I switched over to computer science and I was like, perfect. If I can't be one stereotype, I'll be another
There
one.
you go. Yeah. So med school's your backup.
Yeah, med
wow,
school's my
man.
backup. Yeah. Well, I was like, if I get a computer science degree, I could always go to med school later.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. My co-founder is a doctor as well, and so is our founding engineer. So we have a bunch of doctors.
Oh my goodness, alma mater.
Yeah, but they've all transitioned over to being computer scientists / coders, and so it's been kind of crazy how we've all made that transition. And like now, this is like the very secure job, I guess.
Yeah.
And then even when my co-founder asked me to be a co-founder, I never saw myself as a founder. By any means. And it was only when he asked me, it was like this opportunity specifically, because I never had that idea. I never had something that I was like, okay, I would start my own thing based off of this, or, I don't know. I definitely, obviously at some point would see myself in a leadership role, but in this capacity, I didn't necessarily think so. I've always considered myself more of, on the operator side, being the kind of person who like executes rather than having the vision.
Yeah. Do you think that's fair though? Because you met your co-founder in an entrepreneurship program.
Yeah.
So you clearly had some aspirations of maybe not being a co-founder, but being involved in something.
Well, yeah. So I actually love startups because I wanted to be a VC.
Okay.
I wanted to be an investor and support.
A lot of us do.
Yeah. I know. I feel like I've always gone down like the slightly evil path as well with my career. Because then I like
now that you're a founder, you have to say this, right?
Yeah.
The origin story is here.
Yeah. Like I did want to be a VC for the longest time. That's part of when I went into computer science. I was like, oh, so I can be a better investor because I'll understand the technology. And then I wanted to work with startups because I was like, that will be great experience when I'm an investor one day. And then I did work in finance for a couple of years. So there has always been that part of me. I am a born and raised Manhattanite, and I think that was going to come out at some point.
Right.
But yeah, that was the whole motivation for working with startups. And I loved working with startups. I worked with a broad range beyond just Shortly, and I love supporting them. So when I was in university, I worked basically every single semester with a different startup, which is a really cool part of the privilege of going to university in London. Is there's so much going on and there's such an amazing startup ecosystem. So outside of class, I was actually getting to implement what I was learning and get hands-on experience. And I just loved, and then I still had I was doing internships with Goldman Sachs throughout my whole degree as well during all of my breaks. So it was this weird thing of like, I really was into startups, but I also really liked the kind of risk-averse corporate experience. And then when I got to Goldman, actually the team that I was on was very much a startup when we started. A relatively new team. I worked in structuring, which means that we come up with trade ideas. And so we kind of sit between sales and trading. And it was completely brand new when I joined it. And we were trying to prove that our trades were valid and worth selling and worth getting. And it was so amazing to see over the years I was there. It went from being one of the smallest teams to one of the most hyped, talked about teams.
That's interesting. So can you actually expand on that a little bit in terms of like where there's like an industry focus? Was it vertical focus? Was it just algo based? Like what does that mean to be a startup in Goldman Sachs?
Yeah. So a structure is it's like a product specialist essentially. So they're coming up with a product. Ours was called a basket, which is kind of like an index if you're familiar with like the S&P 500 and stuff like that. So it's a group of different stocks or so equities, companies. And what we would do is pick themes that we would collect in that basket. So for example, one of the most popular ones we had was like a COVID winners and losers basket. So these are the companies that are going to benefit the most from COVID. So companies like Zoom and Netflix versus companies that will suffer. So like travel stocks.
Right.
And so that was a really interesting, we could give people a way to trade these themes. But we were coming up with these ideas that those baskets in particular we came up with in January of 2020, but for Europe and the US. So, we had to think of, okay, there's this thing going on in China. What if it came to Europe and the US? Which stocks would be impacted? And I don't know about you guys, but I personally wasn't thinking about COVID in January of 2020.
I was, but I was kind of in the cusp of supply chain proof of concepts and
Okay.
stuff, so I had some exposure to it. Like I remember I was working with my co-founder, and he was like telling me, "Oh, they're closing ports in China. This could be big." And I was like, "Yeah, we'll be fine." And then next thing I know, 2 months later, everything's
You're right. I just
Yeah.
I knew stuff was happening in China, but I didn't imagine it impacting the US or Europe. But we were like, okay, if anyone wants to trade this idea, and there's the same thing with Brexit, all the elections. And then there's also a quantitative side, which was more of my focus, which is like trading factors. And so I was building algorithms to build those trades, and then also kind of hedges that are a little more factor based. So yeah, it's a really interesting product. I don't want to bore you guys too much.
No,
because
I actually love it. Like I read this book by Ray Dalio.
Oh, I love Ray Dalio.
Yeah, he's a really intelligent investor, right? And I think I've read almost every one of his books, honestly. But just for the audience, I guess that's like his claim to fame, right? I think it was like in the 60s or 70s. I don't remember the time frame, but basically had like this advisory firm, like going to like these large conglomerates and basically saying, hey, like, how do I de-risk your operational cost for the long term? So the problem is like, let's say chicken or poultry costs like is very unpredictable over the course of 5 years or 10 years. So he would basically come up with a model to hedge their risk so that the price of that cost of goods or cost of chicken for them would be stable.
Yeah.
So why is that good? Lots of people are like, oh, well, don't you always want it when it's low? It's because in business, when you have predictability, that's the best thing you can have, which by the way, we'll start plugging in
Yeah.
your startup here in a second. But like when you have predictability in your data and in your cost, then you can plan around those things.
Absolutely.
And if you can increase that horizon as long as possible. So like essentially what he would do is come up with these crazy models and correlation metrics that'd say like, hey, if price of chicken goes up by 5%, usually the cost of corn goes down by 3%. And so like if you expose yourself this percentage, then your cost can stay consistent. And that strategy is what literally every single Fortune 500 and now more use to predict like literally 20 years cost out.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what we were
love this
building.
stuff too.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And then we were kind of thinking of new ways to optimize that. So automating your hedging. So, because the thing is that it's not perfect necessarily, but we're like, how close to perfect can we get? And so it was really cool because I think when we first started, people had very traditional ways of hedging and they weren't necessarily thinking about these newer ways, and that with technology were now possible. And so it was very much like proving, okay, here's the value, here's how we're making our customers money. And that's where data became so important as well. And so while we didn't have investors, we had stakeholders, partners at the firm who we needed to convince of our idea to allocate, whether it was funds but also just attention, getting salespeople to be pushing our trades. And so it's just a weird, I was like, oh yeah, it kind of is just a startup in a way. And I'm still getting that experience. And even now I realize, I think some people have this perception of like, if you work in corporate and you go to startups, you're basically throwing away all of your experience or it's not necessarily relevant. But oh my goodness, that is like the furthest from the truth. All of my corporate experience has been so incredibly valuable to me as a founder. It has made me a better founder because of all of the things that I've had to go through, whether it's politics or whether it's, kind of just managing people, self-motivating at the end of the day. Working on a trading floor is very intense. I had to be at my desk at 7 a.m. every single day. And if I wasn't there, then, that's just, it's over essentially. And so now obviously it's a little less stressful, but I try to keep that momentum a little bit. Like I'm still up early in the morning on my desk as soon as possible. Feeling like, I'm just going to get as much done as I can, treating it like it's a trading situation.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. Like I don't agree with that ideology though, like in terms of corporate experience isn't valuable, because I think there's so much that you can learn from it. And honestly, I think there's some bad habits of corporate for sure that you have to be mindful of, but in general, you have so much opportunity to learn. And usually most people that you hear say this are like the really young 22-year-old or 21-year-old.
Absolutely.
Which some of these are stars, right?
Yeah.
But and it worked out for them. But at the same time, I'm like, man, like that. There's so much that you can learn in a corporate environment. And leverage those skill sets as well. Like I wouldn't sleep on those.
No, absolutely.
Especially that you transition into like a B2B product. So you're literally,
absolutely.
like you're literally interfacing with maybe the opposite side or type of personality base, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
And you can also, I mean, at least when I was at IBM, right, during COVID, it was very valuable because I was specifically in retail and travel.
Yeah.
So two of the markets I got hit the most. And it's funny that you brought up chicken because I worked, Costco was one of my accounts. Love Costco.
Love Costco. That is one thing I really miss. Sorry, I'm not.
No,
you're
That's
good.
totally a different topic.
That's the
This is
millennial.
a Costco fan account.
Yeah,
so.
as an American in London, that's one thing I really miss.
Oh, thank you. And so, but yeah, one of the projects I was working on was on chicken farms because Costco loses money on their chicken. And so it just became like even the data handling of how we're doing it, if we can make that more efficient, we lose at least less money on the chicken. But I think one of the biggest benefits of going into corporate is that you really start seeing where problems can come from. Right?
Yeah.
Because I think if you don't have that corporate experience, and this is at least speaking directly from my perspective, you're only looking at things as like, if I can sell this, then this will happen, right? Whereas internally within a business, there's so many other problems that another company can exist purely to solve that as a consumer mind, right? As a basic consumer mind, you're not thinking about.
Yeah.
But as a business consumer, now that you're working in corporate, you're seeing all these other opportunities that you may have not have seen. But one of the other biggest benefits I have being in corporate is professionalism.
Absolutely.
And how to work with people that are older than you, different demographics, different backgrounds, and really being able to tune your messaging to get people to work with you. And that is a skill set that oftentimes you don't really get in many places. And the other benefit is corporate, you get to learn all of this with some sense of job security and make those mistakes. Which, I mean, even at my time at AIG, I really appreciated because I was able to ask what to me was complicated questions, but for senior leadership, they're like, oh, these are things that you'll learn at XYZ steps. And then they kind of a good mentor is always really beneficial, which I think when you get those skill sets, you know what to transfer over when you're going into an entrepreneurial space. I think sometimes we get stuck with corporate getting a lot of, I guess, hate, is that you get structured into a frame of thinking and not asking those like awesome questions like, well, what if?
Or
right?
speed.
Yeah, or speed. Yeah.
If you let that affect you, like,
right.
Yeah, but that's why it's so important to have diverse founders and people coming from different backgrounds. And that's why I love that my co-founder doesn't come from a corporate background, but I do. And so we can kind of have very different, experiences. And whether it comes to dealing with investors or enterprise customers, for example, I love red tape. That's one of my favorite things because that's something I had to deal with at Goldman all the time, reading through contracts, figuring out like bureaucratic processes.
Yeah.
And for a lot of my competitors, they get to that first gatekeeper and they're like, okay, I'm out, because they don't have that corporate experience. They don't thrive in those kinds of environments. Thrive is a strong word. I would love to not have like a minimum 9-month sales cycle, but that's just the world we live in. Because once you get those contracts, they're so unlikely to churn because you need to wait for someone else to go through that whole process. Obviously, also our product is amazing, so they don't want to churn. But I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm actually giving a speech on this exact topic at Muslim Tech Fest.
Yes.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
So you're helping me plug it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's actually the purpose of
Do
this
you
podcast.
want to pitch it? Because we're doing clips for our social media. So we
Oh,
can have
cool.
it as a
Yeah,
clip.
I'm happy to chat about that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm giving a talk about moving from corporate to startups, aka from suits to sweatpants. And I'm talking about kind of my own experience. When I first became a founder, I did notice a lot of the hate that corporate got. A lot of people were like, you should have started sooner, or, you should have considered dropping out of school to become a founder. This is something students I mentor hear a lot.
Yeah.
And I am so incredibly grateful for my corporate years. It's made me so much better of a founder. And so I wanted to share my experience and kind of encourage people who are in corporate to not be afraid of doing a startup as well, to not feel like, okay, it's an opportunity cost or I'm throwing away all of my experience, and to really understand, it's okay to take that leap. And for any students to realize, you can take your time, right? No one else should define your timelines. And whatever experience you have, you don't need to have a corporate background. If you do have one, great. You can come from academia, whatever it is, that's a superpower. Right? That is an asset, and that's what makes you different and cool. Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out at 19 and started his company. That's super exciting. But if you're not like that, that's totally fine as well. And that you're just doing your own thing, and you also have a great story. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about. And
awesome.
I hope it resonates.
I think so. I mean, I don't want to. I think a lot of the success stories always get amplified, right? Whether it be Mark Zuckerberg or Gates, all of them. But not everyone has a starting point of some privilege.
Correct.
Right?
That's a big one.
And especially being Muslim, I think this identity really resonates beyond ethnicity of being Desi. But there is some sense of a provider mindset, right? Whether it be you're a male or whether it be you're female, it kind of exists. And it's something we can't just ignore. I think for a lot of these super successful stories, some people are extremely, fortunate to have a support group or a financial, safety net. But for many of us, they may not have that. And I do think it's possible to get best of both worlds. Get that structure, and whether it be going to corporate, whatever that is, once you have it, then you might get the opportunity to meet and network with people that can help you build out more of that entrepreneurial dream.
Yeah.
To your point, you met your co-founder in university, right? And I think there's a lot of hate towards don't go to college and all this stuff lately. And my pushback to that is I think college is a great place to learn, yes, but it's probably one of the best places to network.
Absolutely.
Right? Companies are coming. Speakers are coming, your classmates who will be future employers, future employees, right? I mean, even my current job is literally my best friend from 3rd grade, right? I lost contact with him for about 15, 20 years, randomly see him, excuse me, on LinkedIn, and just started messaging him. And I was like, hey, I'm looking for a job at the time. He's like, oh, actually, I'm a partner at this consulting firm. Do you want to join? I'm like, yes, I do.
Awesome.
This worked out really well, right? But stories like that exist in a lot of, avenues. And so I think when you're going into college, yes, it's a big investment, but the way you make the most out of it is doing the things that you were doing, right? Joining the entrepreneurship circles and things like that. And then you're really able to find that value.
Yeah, I think I was joking earlier about my brothers being like my kids. And they might be surprised to hear this because they probably think I'm a tiger mom, which I am a little bit, but not everything is about career and academics. And I also think college is just a good place to grow up a little bit in your personal development. And I would not have been a good founder at 19 years old. Realistically, I needed that time to mature. And it even extended into working in corporate. I definitely grew up a lot in my first couple of years at Goldman, and I'm so grateful for that time. So as much as I also built my network and sharpened my skills and all of that, it's also just learning to deal with people and learning in myself what my values were and what I think is most important so that I can go into running a company with confidence.
No, that's key. And I want to transition a little bit here.
Well, before you transition, I had one more thing I wanted to mention because I think this corporate topic is really interesting.
It's so cool.
I mean, it is, and it's got a stigma. I don't agree with you on the college thing, by the way, but maybe I could save that for another.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we could talk about that in a second. Then
I met you in college.
we did, but the landscape. Okay, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of this corporate concept, though, dang, I lost my thought.
What triggered it? What did I say something? I can go through bullet points.
No, it's okay. It's fine. Well, it comes naturally, or it's okay.
Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, I don't know. I talk to students all the time. Also, I really liked your point about being Muslims, and often Muslims in the West come from an immigrant background as well. My parents are both immigrants to the United States, right? And they worked very hard to give me privileges, and I still have so much privilege. But there are things at the end of the day. For example, I need a visa to remain in the UK, right? So I couldn't just start a startup right out of college or drop out of school. These are the things my university and my corporate career were able to keep me in the UK. There were things like I needed to provide for myself. myself. I'm not in a position where I could have someone else provide for me. And my parents worked so hard to, put me in a position where I could do that. And it's not just because of prestige or vanity.
Yeah.
It's just that is the reality of the situation. So being able to build that personal capital before taking a risk was super important. And that's something that I feel like it's very easy for other people to be like, okay, yeah, just take a risk, have fun, just go for it. Right. But you have to think about what's important to you and what's necessary.
You're not living the day to day, right?
Yeah.
I remembered my thought.
Okay. Oh, amazing.
And you triggered it. So thank you. No, but basically, like, I think what's unique about like going into corporate, so if you do have like this concept, like you actually did it sounds like in your kind of thought process when you decided to take Goldman Sachs. But if you're wanting to go into corporate, maybe you work on something that is going to be valuable while you're there that you can take away, knowing that you want to be a startup founder or an entrepreneurial, somewhere in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think many times people do things and they don't know why they do them. Right? They're just like, oh yeah, I need to just find a job, right? But if you're going in with you can have the same experience, like you can have the same job, but a different experience if you just change your framework of what you can get out of that experience.
Absolutely.
So if you're going in with like I'm going to go and I'm going to use this because I want to be a VC operator potentially or understand this side, then it's like how like whenever you just like lately I've been looking into car dealerships just because of one of the companies I'm going to be working with, and now I notice every single car dealership, like whenever I go anywhere, like if I'm driving down the street, I'm like, oh, there's a car dealership, there's a car. So it's like you just naturally start attracting the things you start thinking about. So if you just frame you're like, oh, I'm going into the corporate environment for this reason, roughly, then you're just going to naturally pull those types of skill sets and things and dive into those a little bit further.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we talked about this last night with a dinner, but it's called the red car theory or the yellow car mindset, right? Yeah. It's like, how often do you see a yellow car, right? When you're not thinking about a yellow car, you're not really seeing it. But now that I've mentioned yellow car, our listeners and you, and throughout your day, you will be more aware of a yellow car. Even though it's not your focus, but now that we've just even talked about it, it becomes awareness. And I think it's a really good important to have that mindset when you're going into something, really figuring out why and how it's building towards your future, right? But if you're just going in completely with no frame of mindset of anything, then I think it can sometimes harm you because you're going too much with the flow. And I think it's in the balance of like having some vision, but also allowing yourself to be a little bit open to new things, right?
Yeah, I think having like a clear, this is where intention of like your religion and also like what you want out of something come into play, right? Like there should be a clear, like even like a founder, right? Like you should have a relative idea of what your exit is and making sure that's aligned with your other founders.
Right.
Not because you want to necessarily exit the company, but just making sure that you're aligned on the long-term trajectory. So it's like you got to go in with things with the right mindset.
Absolutely.
And you got to go into things with like having some, what do I want out of this and what am I okay with, and then be flexible.
Yeah.
But you have to have that initial discussion, and it can't just be like, it's not of like it's like a mandatory thing, I think.
Yeah.
Well, this is something when people come to me and they're like, I'm thinking of starting a company. I have this buddy that I want to do it with. The first thing I say they should do is sit down and really talk through their priorities. And I kind of have a list of questions that Gossam and I went through, but also like YC has a list, for example. But I remember when we first started doing it, before I fully committed to, leaving my job and everything, it was so funny. There's this coffee shop across the street from the Goldman Sachs office. Mm-hmm. And I would be like, hey guys, I have a catch up. I just have to go like after the market would close. And I would go sit there with Gossam for like half an hour and talk through things like, oh, okay, what if we have an exit where, okay, let's say someone offered us $10 million. What if they offered us, just every kind of hypothetical, but more just to see where our mindsets were at, not necessarily to be like, okay, we need to have the same exact answer, but we just wanted to get those kinds of things ironed out before we committed, because it is like, it's a major commitment. I compare co-founder relationships to marriage in a way,
it is.
But with like none of the fun stuff, and all you stress about is money. So it's just kind of, it's really important that you get that solidified in the beginning.
Yeah. So this is crazy. Another crazy statistic in the US, you have a higher likelihood to be in a business relationship with someone longer than you are with a marital, which is kind of sad, than in a marriage. So average marriages, I think, last about 7 years. Usually business relationships are 15.
Is that even if the business fails, if that relationship maintains?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh,
Which is
wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy.
But yeah, I
I mean,
mean,
divorce rates are also unfortunately super high. It's like 60,
yeah, but I also
70%.
feel like co-founder breakups are super. But maybe it's
No,
just
but
the group I associate with.
no, they happen. But I also feel like naturally, like you're a little bit more business professional. Like even if you have some issues on the wrong side of the table, like you usually come back around at some point, right? To
That's
build.
true.
And it's hard. Like business circles are small. Like
Yeah.
relatively speaking, right? Like you're gonna know if
I feel
anyone's.
like
We're coming to 10 years pretty soon.
Are
here.
you
Yeah,
really?
yeah.
No, but
love
I
that.
completely agree with you, and that's the same exact way that I think people should think about it, because the same
Yeah.
level of intimacy and being
Yeah.
able to like at least with my wife, like I just like she knows how I operate. If I put her, if she gives me a scenario, she knows probably what I'm gonna do. If I give her a scenario, I probably know
Yeah.
what she's gonna do. That's the same way you kind of need to work your way into as a co-founder.
Yeah.
You need to be able to trust that they're gonna handle this investor in this way or this or this customer this way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that level of autonomy is not just like it's not just you have to earn it over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
It's
that's trust.
that trust and respect at the end of the day. And I feel so confident in my co-founder that no matter what he's doing is for the best of the business. There have been so many times where we've had very different views on the same thing. And the reason or the way we're able to get through it is I know it's not because he wants to sabotage the business that he's coming up with this idea, right? It's because he genuinely thinks it's the right way to handle it. And so it kind of creates this understanding, and then we can work through it that way. But I do hear, I talk to a lot of founders, and when they do have disagreements with their co-founder, it's they assume some sort of malicious intent.
Right.
Or they don't really respect the way that they're thinking about it or feel like they can trust them. It's so interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm not married, but I'm like, I can imagine now I'm like, when I meet someone, we're going to go through my questions.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rahma Center has like 100 premarital questions, but I mean, those questions are important though, right? Because I think a lot of times, like so much is like value driven or value based.
Absolutely.
And a big element of, at least within our deen, right, is assuming the best, at least from a fellow Muslim, assuming the best from the other. And I think when you have that frame of mindset that you're saying, it's like, he's not going into it, your partner is not going into it with a malicious mindset, right? A mindset that is sabotaging or anything like this, right?
Absolutely.
It's much better to be like, okay, they were obviously trying to do the best for the company. I know they care about this. How that's done may differ for me, but I can't attack them because I'm assuming the worst. That's not really fair to a person that you're working with or your partner or whomever.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say, is it okay if we maybe transition a little bit more into
Yes.
this? Okay, so you have this co-founder that, or now becomes your co-founder, but someone you've worked with, entrepreneurial ecosystem, exited. Can you walk us through like how, like maybe the beginning days of Menza, what kind of led you to that? Clearly your background and experience kind of combined everything together, but maybe get a little bit more tactical with like, what was the kind of that aha moment for this business, and what was that validation that was like, yeah, this is really something worth pursuing?
Yeah, I think it was that launching as soon as possible. And again, for me and Gossam, we're both kind of perfectionists. And so we really needed YC. I mean, we only really started our company when we did YC, and they were just like, you need to launch ASAP. And so we did. And we had a very bad version of our product.
That's good that you say that.
Objectively, like it does not look remotely close to what we have today. But we did this thing, and it was a YC challenge. And I'm so glad we did it. Sometimes, I mean, I can get into this a little bit. I feel like we did YC a little too early, but then there are benefits to having done it so early. And they challenged us to have 100 people use it within a week.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
like properly use it.
That's awesome.
So I was calling every single person I knew, including my mom.
Yeah.
My mom, so the way it worked back then is you could just upload a spreadsheet and get some quick analysis off the top of it. And my mom was like, okay, what kind of spreadsheet? Like, how do we, and she uploaded some like weird corrupt file when she did it. And my dad, he just had gotten a puppy at that time. And classic immigrant parent with the dog, like became obsessed with her and had a spreadsheet. He's a former investment banker, by the way, for context. Okay. He had a spreadsheet with her like eating and pooping schedule, and he uploaded that to Menza.
Gives the dog a whoop.
Yeah, literally. Like he was optimizing like what she was eating, and then when she went to the bathroom and how she went to the details I did not need to know. So I was like, fine, give it to the AI. And so it was just interesting to kind of get immediate feedback, and people were brutal, which was great. That's what we needed. We had to prompt them a little bit to be brutal, but then that gave us kind of insights. And then, yeah, we just kept like moving as quickly as we could, iterating. And then I honestly, to be honest, I don't think we got to the point where we were like, okay, this is our aha moment, or feeling like we were getting close to product market fit until about 6 months ago.
Until 6 months ago.
Yeah, so it took a year.
As of right now, 6 months ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it took a year and a half of our company before we were like, oh, we're onto something.
So let's come back to that in a second, because I want to
Yeah.
slow grind this.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. Because I think it's really interesting. Like, so the purpose of this podcast is kind of twofold. One is like to really make sure we highlight and show like, hey, we've got some awesome Muslim entrepreneurs. The second is like really to inspire the next generation. So I think a lot of our listeners are going to be in that very early stage, right? And so like, your first 100 customers or your first 100 potential users, right? When YC challenged you with this, what was the thought process? Like, were you ditching down on a focus like, oh, we're only going to deal with this? Or were they just like, go talk to anyone that's going to go on your platform?
They said go talk to anyone and everyone. And that's because we didn't really know who would use our product. So we're a data analytics tool. And so it's kind of everyone has data in some capacity. It was hard to figure out, okay, which industry do we focus on? And I do think eventually you do need to find a niche, and you need to verticalize to a certain extent. You can end up being horizontal at the end of the day, but you need to kind of figure out what your ICP is. And so for us, it was just kind of like seeing as many use cases as possible. And then that's when we started to figure out, okay, we wanted to focus on non-technical users, because those were the people of those 100. We actually ended up doing way more than that. That was just our first week.
Yeah,
that was just our first week. But we ended up, in the months later, we ended up talking to, thousands of people, and we found non-technical users got the most value out of the product. And it is really just hustling and like trying to talk to as many people as possible. And I was like calling people who I'm like, hey, I know we haven't spoken since high school, but I see you have this role. Would you be interested in trying out my tool? And it was just kind of getting it in front of as many people as possible. And I will say, do not become a founder if you are concerned about your ego and keeping it intact, because it is the most humbling experience possible. And it's good. It's good. You want negative feedback. When people say really nice stuff about my product, I'm like, okay, yeah, but give me something I can work with, right? I need something that I can actually improve on.
I already knew all the good stuff.
I knew all the good stuff. Yeah.
My to-do list.
Yeah. I was just talking to a customer yesterday, and he was saying really nice stuff. And I was like, okay, but like, can you be helpful for a second? Just tell me what exactly you need.
Yeah, you're a perfect CTO.
Good, bad, good, bad,
You're like, how do I
ugly.
build out my roadmap a little bit better?
Yeah, I'm like, okay, cute story. I'll put it on my website. But next,
Don't talk to my co-founder.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything you said, write it as a review. Now tell me the bad stuff.
Yeah,
Don't write that in the review, though.
I'm like, yeah, let's make a little testimonial and then get to the real business.
Okay, no, that's awesome. So basically, like, you're like anyone and everyone that I can talk to, so they can figure out what vertical.
Yeah.
Was there any like, I guess like, okay, so how did you go with that into like a more formal go-to-market strategy? Was that aha moment?
So initially we were like, okay, we're going to be consumer. We knew we were going to be B2B, right, at the end of the day. But we were like, let's frame it as consumer so we can get as many people as possible using it and just uploading spreadsheets, getting insights. We wanted to understand what kind of insights are most helpful. We wanted to also optimize the AI as much as possible. So getting as many users was the focus, and just talking to them and actually spending time with them. And then we would also just look at interesting metrics. Like, for example, we saw a guy so at one point we decided to create like a paid version. So after 10 questions, you hit a paywall.
Okay.
Right. And it was just to validate, like, would people actually pay this or not? And this guy kept creating new accounts so he wouldn't have to pay for it. And so we were like, let's call him. And this guy. Yeah. It wasn't you, because we called him. It was a guy down in Australia.
Whoa.
And I was like, what's the deal, man? What's going on? And he's like, I find it really useful, but I can't pay for it as a consumer. I'd have my company pay for it for me, because, I use it for work. And I don't want to pay for work stuff with my own money. And we're like, perfect. So there is a B2B use case here. And so that's kind of like, and then we were like, okay, let's take all of our users, once we started doing the B2B use case, and let's figure out like 10 different personas that we can categorize them into. And like, what kind of companies are they coming from? What kind of roles? And then we started doing more kind of quantitative tests, right? Figuring out what our metrics were that were like were our North Star, right? That we were going to say, this means it's a successful product for this person. So whether it's, how much are they using it, right? Are they using it every working day? How long are they using it for? How are they actively using it versus like, okay, yeah, they can be sitting on our website for like 4 hours, but it's probably because they have the window open, right? Or are they actually like creating things, asking questions? Then it was like, okay, if we call them and, how are they using it beyond the platform? So once they get an insight, what are the next steps? And so again, I'm speed running this a little bit, but it was a lot of that for a year and a half while also developing the product, because we went into this knowing we're building something that is not currently feasible.
Now, is the team just y'all two still? Or?
Yeah,
okay.
So just us. And then about 6 months ago, that's when we decided to expand our team, but we also took a big bet. So we looked at our 10 personas and we said, who is benefiting the most from our platform? And we found that it was people who were coming from consumer brands. So they were all non-technical. They were mostly small to medium-sized brands. So consumer brands is a very broad term still, but that is our kind of focus. So it's like food and beverage, fashion and beauty. We work with consumer tech companies as well. People who had consumer data. So like
CPG space.
CPG space. Yeah. So anyone who has like an overwhelming amount of data that is extremely fragmented across their ads platforms. They have, kind of like their supply, everything, right? So we have over 650 integrations, and we're like, okay, but which ones are actually being used? Who are the people who are coming back every single day and finding a lot of value and feeling like, okay, this is actually like generating revenue for us. It's not just making us more efficient. And that's when we were like, in December, we were like, okay, that's what we need to focus on. So we fired all of our customers except for our brands. Which was a really scary thing to do.
It's a good place to be, but it's also
it's a good place to be.
But it's also one of the most challenging things to do.
And it's definitely a privilege of being VC backed as well, because we weren't necessarily relying on that revenue. But it was part of it was, I'm so glad we did it because we could then focus. Yeah. Right. Everyone else was a distraction, and once we did that, it was just like sparks flew. Like we were just like a spark went off, and go to market was so much easier because we had a clear message. Right. Before we were selling everything to everyone. And when you sell everything to everyone, nothing resonates. Right now we could be like, this is exactly what we help you with. And that was resonating with our users. Then it was very clear, okay, so for our users, they could then, we could build specifically to their use case. And so they were happy with it. Then they start telling their friends about it. And this is at the point where we're like, okay, we're actually like onto something, because people are becoming obsessive about the product. We're getting to the point where we were shipping things, and if things broke, people cared. And we were like, whoa, that's crazy. Yeah. And then that's when we were like, okay, we need a founding engineer. And to be honest, we probably needed an even bigger team. But one of the benefits of where we are with AI is that we can scale so much bigger with a way smaller team. Right. We are way more efficient. And my co-founder and I are both technical. We have an amazing founding engineer. We're a team that, I think people underestimate how much of a job people management is. It is a whole other job in itself, and we just didn't feel ready to do that. We wanted to build a team where we were like, okay, the three of us, we know we work really well together and we can scale to as big as possible. We're now starting to think about hiring more people, but it's been a long journey. And I do talk about this a lot because I think hiring and like the number of people you have is very much a vanity metric. It's something I get asked all the time when I tell people I have a business. They're like, how many people work for your business? And I'm like, it's just 3 of us. And they just assume that means we're a very small business. Or you can see the dismissive look in their face. Especially in Europe, I'll say this mentality is massively pervasive, especially with investors.
Interesting.
Where I've had
investors
with investors, which is shocking. But here, a lot of investors are career investors. So over 90% have never been an operator or founder at any point before. They've always been an investor. And so for them, they like those vanity metrics because they're like, that's how they can tell their LPs, hey, look, our company's doing super well. They have 50 people. Do they have revenue? I don't know about that, but
Yeah, that's like the opposite, man. I think employee say revenue per employee is one of the most important metrics for me personally.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Like because I think like especially today, like oh my gosh, you can do
Yeah.
so many things operationally with as low of a team as possible.
Absolutely. And
Lovable is what, like 10 people right now?
I'm not sure, but
yeah.
Lovable dev, and
I
that's
wouldn't
like
be surprised.
yeah, I wouldn't
would
be
not
surprised at all.
I
But
feel like
yeah,
that is like one of the biggest metrics because I
Yeah.
feel like it's a good
but
definition of like efficiency.
Yeah, like one of the companies I really look up to is Retool, right? And they got to 1 million in revenue in their Series A with just 4 employees, right? And that's kind of a dream scenario for us, is if we can keep it as small as possible. Because the thing is, at the end of the day as well, there's so many things to consider, but we're like, if we pivot tomorrow, because you never know what might happen, are we with a team where we feel like everyone can pivot and do this new
jive,
product
move
together
quick,
and
yeah.
move quick and not have to worry about, oh no, now we have, we could be doing something super random and there's no one who I'm like, okay, yeah, they're no longer relevant to the team. Right. And I
Yeah.
think, again, we are definitely stretched thin. But it's an immense privilege to find a team you can work really well and quickly with. And for us, we really want to be intentional when adding people to that team. Yeah.
yeah, so I get we kind of jumped right into it because I think we know a little bit about Menza, but maybe like
Yeah.
just for the audience, like what do you think? Like how can you summarize what Menza is
Yeah.
like in a pitch format type of thing?
Yeah,
Like a 30 second-
absolutely. So we're a data analytics platform for consumer brands. The way we work is we first centralize all of the brand's data. So we have over 650 integrations. We put it in one place, clean it up using AI. And then what we do is enable non-technical users to make more data-driven decisions by building dashboards, reports, and workflow automations using drag and drop.
Okay, that's awesome. So you have workflow, you have a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
So I think one of the challenges with data, in this industry vertical, is especially like with gathering type of insights, is always like bad data in, bad data out.
Yeah.
Right now, I would say like especially like maybe non-technical users, like they're just uploading random,
Absolutely.
unformatted files and random stuff. So I think that would be like one of the main like problem to be solved, right? So did you see it that way as well? Or like what was kind of your experience and how did you guys go about solving that type of
Yeah,
problem?
absolutely. I think we went into it kind of naively. We were like, oh yeah, like it'll be fine. And then
Everyone has data about
Everyone
how their dog poops and
yeah, exactly. We're
in an
like,
organized, structured manner.
and then I think we also came from a technical perspective. We were like, everyone will understand what's in their data, or their data will be super clean. Like it won't be that bad. How bad could it possibly be? And then I knew a little bit from Goldman, but I didn't realize to what extent. Especially for a lot of the brands we work with, they've never looked at their data before, which is kind of crazy. But we work with like larger luxury brands, and for them, they're like, why would we look at our data? We're a luxury brand, which is kind of insane. And so, I mean, from a technical perspective,
Yeah, I'm
right?
with you.
And that tells you how naive we were going into this. And then now that we're actually in this space, we're like, yeah, it makes sense. When people come to us and they're like, we have disgusting data, or I don't even know what it's doing, like, don't apologize. Like, that's perfect. This is why we're here.
Yeah.
Because we realize that's almost a separate business in itself. You have the data cleaning part, and then you have the insights. And like, those are kind of the two parts of our business. But what's cool is with AI, we now have like another voice almost. We kind of describe our AI as like having someone who has way too much time on their hands and can go through your data manually and clean it up and check it out and sends you questions and clarifying points, or tells you, hey, this looks wrong. Hey, I think this might be missing. And so you can actually do that work now in a way that's way more accessible, rather than, we used to joke, we used to call our tool Steve kind of internally, because there was always a random dude named Steve who knew how things work. And the minute he was gone, everything's messed up. Like, there's just nothing you can do. And so we're like, it's kind of like Steve. He can go through and make sure everything is working, tell you if it's not. And then it's the insights part. That's like the fun part. But we really focus on like optimizing the onboarding as much as possible. We also want to make it quick so that our users can get using it as soon as possible and not have to worry about like needing someone technical necessarily to help them. So there's a bit of like in the beginning, we've been kind of manual and like really helping our users out when we onboard them, but we're actually pushing a new kind of release at the end of the month that will automate a lot of that work.
Oh, nice.
And that allows us to scale a bit more faster as well, because right now we have like a wait list to get people onboarded, and it's a bit of a pain. And now we can be like, okay, yeah, you can just onboard yourself, which
Is it because you said the onboarding's a little bit more manual still at this stage? Okay,
yeah, so
got
we
it.
need at least someone from our team to help kind of clean up their data a little bit.
Got it. Is that, so you said it's like two separate verticals of your business. Is that like, how is that? Is that like a separate product? product? Is that a separate service? Like how do you retrofit it? I mean, you
it's
have 450 integrations. That's a lot of integrations.
It's a lot of integrations. There's a lot. We're, again, really stretched. But it's all, to the user, appears to be one product. But I think we treat them all separately from an internal perspective because they are very different functions. Like the integration maintenance is like a whole thing. The kind of data cleaning part and having agents go through your data. Then we have the agents that do the insights. And then we have like the dashboards and reports and that kind of like workflow automation angle, as well as like its own kind of thing as well. So it's, I would say we have like 3 to 4 different products combined into one. But what's important is that we feel like our users feel like it's super seamless.
Right. One seamless like experience, let's say.
Exactly.
But yeah, anyone who knows, it's like, that's a lot of stuff, you know,
It's a lot of stuff. And I think when we went into it, again, we didn't really realize how many separate products these could all be. But we just had this goal of like giving it all to our users. And, you know, despite, you know, how challenging that's been, I think we've gotten to a good point with it. But yeah, it's a lot of like, we really have to segment, like our day-to-day tasks are just like moving from one product to the other.
Yeah. But it makes sense, right? Like you have a focus on non-technical users, so you're trying to abstract all that stuff from them, right? And that's the value of the application, so that makes sense. Now, in terms of like your target customer, like CPGs, like still a lot of stuff.
It's still
and there's a lot of like mini verticals there. Are you still kind of in that phase right now where you're refining where you want it to be? You want to cover CPG all the way through, TBD?
So
what's your thoughts?
We're currently covering CPG all the way through. We're saying we're focused on small to medium size, but that's also super broad.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So we're working with customers anywhere from like 1 million in revenue to like 200 million at the moment.
Okay.
Which is pretty broad.
It's a lot of TikTok shops.
Yeah, a lot of TikTok shops. I know, it's crazy. It's so cool. I love being in this space because we didn't know this space at all going into it. When we made that decision to focus on this in December, and by the way, it was like December 25th. So it was like actively Christmas. And I was like, I need to get as many people on the phone as possible. But especially in the UK, everything shuts down over Christmas. We are like the only people working. And so I'm literally like, people
the Muslim advantage.
Yeah, literally. It's so true though. It's so true. We're like,
you're opening presents, we're making them, all right?
Exactly. I love that. I love that. That is because we are very much like of that mindset. We'll take Eid off. Even then, it's hard. Like the other day when it was Eid, my founding engineer, something came up because everyone else is working, and he was like, my parents asked why I brought my computer to the masjid. This is why.
Ya Allah.
In the parking lot. And I was like,
so
oh
funny.
my God.
Fact checking the khutbah.
No, but I feel like that's like so common. Like I think I've literally been called out by my in-laws multiple times just for having like my laptop everywhere I go. I'm just like so paranoid. Like I might need it at any moment.
No, and it's literally
The Batman signal goes up. Gotta send an email.
And it's like nothing is happening all day. And then, of course, it's like when you have something really important happening, it's like something comes up, something breaks. No, but he handled it so well. And so, yeah, it was over Christmas. And so I just started DMing people and anyone. And people were actually really nice. Some people were like, oh, as a Christmas gift, I will talk to you. I'm like, okay. But it was really... those kind of early conversations were so enlightening and super helpful because, again, I come from a finance technical background. My co-founder comes from a medical technical background. Understanding how CPGs work, it's like a totally new ballgame. But we love the space. Our customers are amazing. Honestly, from a consumer perspective, this is where I get real American. I love to spend money. And so for me, it's kind of, I know their products pretty well.
Yeah.
And actually some of my co-founder used to joke about like, because he was like, why are all the deals you're closing companies that you actively pay, you know, and know their product really well? I'm like, I have no idea. Maybe that's related to my outbound strategy. I have no idea. But it's cool because then they're like, are you familiar with our product? And I'm like, oh yes, I am familiar with your product. And here's, you know, how our product can be helpful. So yeah, if I'm ever shopping, it's obviously market research.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
One of my really good friends, I work with him at IBM, but he does a lot of ad stuff at Google, and like now he's at Facebook, Zach Cox, a little bit of a shout out there. But I mean, for him, he worked with like Allbirds, Hexclad, and all of them, and he just buys all CPG products all of the time. And so whenever I go visit him, his house is almost like an influencer who just gets like bunch of like deliveries of like different products, but it's like he himself bought all of these. He's like, yeah, just do it until I find one that I really, really like, because I know I can do their ads way better if I love their product and advocate for them. I know there was when we were at a Muslim professionals event in Dallas, and there is a brother that we met there who started an e-com business. I think he was doing I think they were nearing 500K a month in like revenue.
Yeah.
So the CPG space is immense. Like it has so much space to grow. And I think it's a really exciting area. So it's awesome that you're empowering them, especially a lot of folks who go into CPG. It's often like one of their first business endeavors, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And that's why we think it's so valuable, because we feel like we're actually offering value to our customers. Something that CPGs really struggle with is both kind of like the go-to-market side, and then when it comes to scaling. Those are like their two biggest challenges, because they're often selling to very crowded markets.
Yeah.
And it's just like an abyss, right? There's so many products out there. So how do you differentiate yourself? And then once you've differentiated yourself, how do you scale in a sustainable way? Because you're dealing with physical products as well very often. And so that's where we feel like we can provide a lot of value to them. And that's kind of our focus. And so to feel like that's when we were like, okay, we're actually working on something that's actually helpful. Because for a lot of our customers now, they can scale to levels that they didn't think was previously possible.
No, absolutely. I mean, I had a halal marshmallow company, and scaling that, right, going from like selling at a farmer's market to being like, oh, we have like, an ice cream shop has like 13 locations. It's like we went from making it in our kitchen with like 4 or 5 KitchenAid mixers to now being like, I think we need to invest in like an $80,000 marshmallow machine just to handle this one order, right? So the scaling is such a huge challenge in CPG, especially in consumer goods, because there's a lot of these legalities of making sure it's hitting all these standards. So at a certain point, you can't do home kitchen anymore, right? And then you're so focused on that supply chain that you're not even thinking about the data, all this other stuff where you can save money or where you can optimize even more, right? So
absolutely. And that's why we want to take it out of our customers' hands, so they can focus on their actual product and not have to worry about any of the other stuff. And like for a lot of our users, they don't even know where to start. Actually, I would say even technical people have this challenge as well. Of sometimes you don't know what you're looking for until you have it, or you don't know what you don't know. Right. And that's where we see AI being super helpful, is being able to tell you, hey, these are some interesting trends, or these are things you might want to look at. We do a lot of like anomaly detection work and like sentiment analysis, because for a lot of our customers, they're getting Google reviews, for example, and they can't constantly be monitoring that.
Oh, so you pull that in as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
So we try to take as many sources as possible. And so it's, they can kind of get like a proper overview of their company, because there's so much they're focusing on. I mean, we're all founders, so like there's just, your mind is split in so many ways. So if you can just create one place that you can see everything, and you kind of have like a cockpit view.
Just one panel dashboard, right? How are you getting, like, when it comes to like acquiring customers, what's been the biggest way for you to have people just been finding you by word of mouth? Have you been
It's been a lot of word of mouth and inbound, to be honest, which has been really great. And I think a lot of our customers have been really helpful. Like, I think when we were talking about that aha moment, I think when our first customer kind of went evangelical and was like telling people about the product, and he was, and then all of a sudden we got all of this inbound, and we're like, okay, that makes us really happy, because if you like it enough to tell other people about it, and I think a lot of people also gatekeep with their products as well, or like what they're using, and so I think it's like that another level of liking it where you actually want to share it with other people,
right?
And so that has been really cool. I think, for us, it's been a lot of just inbound. I think doing things like YC has been really helpful for marketing. We got Forbes 30 under 30, which has been really helpful for marketing. Obviously, those aren't necessarily qualified leads, so I would really say it's our customers sharing it with other people.
Gotcha.
That's an interesting insight, though. Like you said something that's interesting about you found that some customers gatekeep. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So some people, they have told us literally, hey, this is giving me a competitive advantage. I don't want to tell other people about it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, interesting. But could you? And they're like, yeah, no, it actually is really helpful.
Wow, that's interesting. Maybe you think that's something unique in the CPG space, or just in general? Because I mean, if someone's saying, hey, this is our unique factor, we can run things operationally.
Yeah.
We have data-driven decisions.
Yeah.
That is a pretty big advantage, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. And then
I don't know if it's CPG specific. One thing I'll say about CPG, which is like a good thing and maybe sometimes a bad thing is they're all very close. Everyone knows everyone. It's a very small world, especially within the same kind of vertical. And so if you mess up big time, and everyone will know. And if you do well, everyone will know as well to a certain extent. And so that was one thing I was nervous about, was like, how do we break into that? Because I think CPGs feel like they're sold software very often, but software that doesn't resonate with them. And so you don't want to come at it like an outsider necessarily. You want to really understand their pain points and be able to say, no, I actually understand. Like, I genuinely think this will be helpful for you.
Are a lot of the customers in the CPG space for you, are they in like consumers, like food based, or are they like beauty and cosmetics? Like
It's all over the place.
Okay.
And we even work with some consumer tech, which is like maybe not the most fitting of our ICP, but it's really cool still.
What is consumer tech? Like, can you give me an example of
Yeah,
consumer tech?
so we work with a marketplace, for example, that provides private chefs. It's like Airbnb for private chefs. And so they have consumers as customers. Or we work with like a couple of apps as well.
Like Get Your Guide, things like that.
Yeah,
almost.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know at least in consumer goods, at least for like the food space, because okay, I know like it sounds like I'm making up stuff at this point because all my experiences are so weird. But like,
he knows the food space very well.
No,
Food
I
and
love
beverage
this.
space.
I would love to derail this conversation and talk about food because I love food.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
unlocked it on there. So yeah, so when I had like I had an automated bubble tea vending machine.
No
That was like one of
way.
my first endeavors I did, and so in that space, at least when I spoke with other bubble tea shop owners, right? You have like your mom and pops, and then you have like the corporate, franchisees, right? And so that's where like branding is so important, because with at least with bubble tea, with the mom and pop shops, they were all kind of sourcing from almost the same suppliers. But a few that gave them some advantage was that they would make certain drinks a little bit more special. Like, we see this everywhere, but back then it's like, oh, we use fresh blueberries, right? All those things they would try to gatekeep. Whatever they could gatekeep, they could gatekeep. They would try to gatekeep their suppliers, even though we both know that you're getting the same suppliers from someone else down the street. But I think it is where, at least for me at that time, it was like branding became a critical element, because you could sell the exact same product, but you win if you have the better brand.
Absolutely.
And who can tell a better story. So I'm not too surprised if they have something like a software that is giving them an advantage. They're like, yeah, this is my secret.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that was a challenge we did not foresee. But we've been really lucky that I think one thing that's great is because we're still so small, we can really build relationships with our customers. So we offer a very hands-on customer service, and that's literally me, my co-founder, and our founding engineer in a Slack chat, or we even have WhatsApp groups with some of our customers.
It's amazing.
And like the minute anything goes wrong, what's kind of fun is we all have very different sleep cycles. So we basically have 24/7 coverage. And so one of us
Like I
will be there.
got from 7 a.m. to
Yeah, literally.
I got Isha the Fuzzer.
your founding engineer is probably like up late at night.
Yeah, so no, he's an early riser like me.
okay.
It's my co-founder is like a
The
late
doctor?
night.
Or
Yeah, so he's up super late at night, and sometimes we have this weird overlap where like he hasn't gone to bed yet, and I've woken up in the morning, and we're like, oh, okay. So we have so our customers know us really well. It's actually our birthday tomorrow.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah.
Happy early birthday.
Thank you. So we're turning 2 years old.
That's awesome.
And part of the way I wanted to spend tomorrow is our founding engineer is actually remote. He's in Bournemouth, so not too far from London, but he's coming into town, and we're gonna go visit some of our early customers, drop off some like little treats and stuff.
That's awesome.
And because we feel like having that personal connection makes a huge difference, and we want them to know like we consider them part of the team to a certain extent. We want to celebrate with them. And I think when they feel like that too, that is when they share a little bit more, because they're just like, you know what, we believe in you guys as a company. And it's such a great vote of confidence to have them respond that way. So yeah, I feel like, well, I did mention that that's something customers have mentioned of like, oh yeah, we wouldn't necessarily share this with other people. They still are sharing it, which is really great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that white glove experience is so important. So it's
Yeah.
great that you guys are doing that. And then even making that touch point of showing up and like having that relationship, like relationship selling is so important, especially like a B2B space. At least when I was with IBM, like the delta between me and like another rep was that I actually cared about their day to day. It was just more than like, you're just a client. It's like, I want a relationship with you because Here's a fun fact, right? That person, they may go to another company. They may go to another CBG brand, especially if they're not like a founder, right? So if they go to another company and they know how well you worked with them, they're going to advocate for you at that new company.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, even at Goldman, I had this, and I'm still in touch with a lot of my old clients from Goldman, which is so funny. But I don't know, I just love the founders we work with as well, or like the heads of teams that we're working with. We work with like heads of growth and strategy, et cetera. They're all really interesting people. Like, it's so fun to hear from their experience because they're doing something so different from what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's a genuine kind of connection that we can make, which is quite nice.
Were you gonna say something?
No, I didn't have it.
Trying to think.
Well, I mean, I can transition into this a little bit, which is, so you're basically have found what you think is your vertical you want to focus on. Hopefully that's successful, but you never know, right? Like something might grow. But basically, you're 6 months into this journey. What does like the next 12 months kind of look like for you guys? The next 6 to 12 months, like what are you guys really laser focused on? What would you consider like, oh yeah, we're moving in the right direction like 6 months from now?
Yeah, so I think we've gotten to the point where we're really confident in our product and how our users are using it, and we have a really great customer base. We're in a good place with revenue. So it's really just scaling now. So getting more customers, getting more people on the platform, using it, making the platform easier. Like I mentioned at the end of the month, we want to take out a little bit of the kind of manual process involved in onboarding so that we can just onboard people way faster. I think the other thing for us is, just continuing to iterate on the product. There's so much development-wise that can continue to happen. And there's so much going on in the AI world. Things are moving so quickly, and we've been able to move so quickly, and I'm just so excited about where the product's going to be in a year. I can't even imagine it today. Yeah. I'm very much, again, a planner, and I like to have my like 5-year plan, 10-year plan. At some point I wrote a plan where I was like, okay, in 10 years we're going to have IPO. What are the things we need to hit in order to get to that point? But it changes so much, and it's having that flexibility. It's nice to have a guideline, but then at the end of the day, we're like, okay, we have to just go with the flow and see what works. Did I know that we were going to be focused on the CPG space 7 months ago? Not necessarily. Did I know that it would take off in the way that it did in the past couple of months? I had no idea. I hoped it would. But it's been really an interesting experience, and it's taught me a lot personally of just how to just let things be a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's really interesting about your team structure is you're technical. You have an engineering founder who's obviously technical, and then you have another successful exited co-founder who has now turned technical. So it's like a very relatively technical team, right? How do you counterbalance some of those? Like, so it also sounds like you take care of some of the legal and some of those like investor relation type stuff. But what about like the marketing side or the sales side? Like, is it all of you guys founder led?
Yeah,
doing marketing?
I would say everything.
So you guys are kind of just embedding all those skill sets with all of you guys. I was just curious, like, how do you balance that one?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Do we do it well? I don't know.
Especially for someone who's technical. Like I at least for myself, like I'm so bad with like marketing and anything with. I mean, sales I can kind of do because I need to, but like I just kind of like such a builder mentality that I'm just like, okay, let me put my head down.
No,
and
I'm
focus.
so bad at it as well, and I have no sense of aesthetics. I often found when I did my undergrad and was studying computer science, and even when I was at Goldman, right, I was the only woman on the team, and it was the same in a lot of my projects in university. And they'd be like, "Oh, Mariam, you can handle front end, right? Because you're the girl, and you should be good at this kind of like stuff." And I'm like, "No, it's gonna look awful. You don't understand. I have no." Yeah, I'm like, in this case, like,
don't put me in a box.
Sexism does not work because like I'm here to break any stereotypes that you have about women having an aesthetic sense, because I'm so bad at that kind of stuff. And so like I use Canva a lot for our like marketing materials and like our decks and stuff. To be honest, we haven't done much like active marketing yet. It's something we've been looking into. There are a lot of cool AI tools. I was talking to a founder, and he's building like a AI CMO essentially. And he was like, "Oh, does anyone want to try this out?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely. If I can just like put our website, you put your website link in, and it gives you assets that you can use for marketing and kind of like, different ways that you can pitch your product and stuff like that." And I was like, "Absolutely. That would be so nice." And it's just been an interesting we haven't implemented any of these things yet, so I can't necessarily endorse it.
Yeah.
But just even to have like that perspective, or like I talk to ChatGPT and Claude all the time.
Yeah.
It depends on how much validation I need. You know, if I'm like if I need it to be really nice to me, I'll use Claude. If I, want to be a little more down to business, I talk to ChatGPT. But that's kind of how we handle it. And then even with sales, it's been a real learning experience. But like my big thing is I know I can't be the expert in everything. Right. And there are people who are always going to be better than me. So if I can learn from them as much as possible or work with them as much as possible, that would be great. And so like, I don't know, this is such a random one, but this is also so American of me. And it was so nice to be in the US. I was heading to a conference in Las Vegas a couple of months ago. And there was this guy next to me. And I don't know how we started talking, but we ended up having a really amazing conversation. And he is like, he's been working in sales for like 40 years. And he was just giving me advice on like how to make the most of the conference, because he was going to Las Vegas for a conference as well, and he's been going to them for ages. Like literally, this guy's in his like 70s, and he was like, "Yeah, here's how you make the most of it." And his advice was super helpful. And it was just really nice to have that as a resource. It was so unexpected. Then he told me where all the best barbecue restaurants are. And he's like, yeah, the pork ribs at this place. And I was like, yum, that sounds great.
Know your audience.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm not ready for that conversation right now. So I was like, great.
That's awesome.
That's funny.
No, that's helpful. I think, I think definitely we're in a new age where even if you don't know something, you can quickly accelerate that knowledge.
Yeah.
And this is why I don't think it's that radical to think that there'll be a couple of companies that are, unicorns that are like 3 people, 2 people,
Absolutely.
like even 1 people. I think I can see like a 1-person billionaire company in the next 5 years. I think that maybe that's a
Yeah.
No,
Actually,
I like
it's not that bold, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, it's
No, I like it.
Lower
like
the
it.
number,
Yeah.
5 years.
yeah, I mean, if you just look at like video, like I don't know video editing or anything like that well, but like I just look at the videos that were coming out from AI like 2 years ago to now.
yeah.
I'm like,
It's crazy.
my, like, Lord, these are like insane. Like,
Yeah.
So it's like the pace of innovation is crazy, and the value is. I mean, we'll see where everything lands, but for sure, like, people are going to be operating at a much faster capacity. Speed. This is why I think speed might not be as. I mean, it's important. Don't get me wrong. Speed still has to be important, but now everyone kind of has the advantage of speed.
Absolutely.
So now you have to have like intention and focus, and have the right framework and strategy. So we'll see how things turn out, but it's really interesting.
Well, this is the bad news. We're hitting 2 hours.
Okay.
We are.
And
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So time has been by fast. So I want to be respectful of your time. But do you have any questions that you had?
I've been
like a
actually
little
asking
primer.
them throughout. So,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I'm good on my side. I guess the one question that I like to usually ask every guest is like, if you had like one AI tool or 2 AI tools that you really had to use for, like, what's like the coolest AI tools that you like to use, I guess.
Well, is it lame if I say Menza?
No.
No,
Be your biggest supporter.
not at all. Right? Give
we
me the why.
we use Menza all the time for our own data.
So
That's
explain
amazing.
that. How do you do that?
Yeah,
Like,
so we plug in our own data sources and we use it to analyze how our customers are doing, what they're doing, any trends that might be relevant, how they're using the product as well. That informs a lot of our product decisions.
Wow.
And it's awesome. I don't know. It's been really cool just to have like, that is our
Yeah.
third co-founder to a certain extent. Even our finances and stuff, we have it plugged into our QuickBooks, and it's actually been really, really helpful.
That's awesome.
And it feels really lame to plug my own product.
No,
No,
I,
no.
that's your job. Literally, it's your job.
Yeah, but it's also it's just cool because that's what when we were like, we need to build something that we would actually use. And so when we're actually using it, it is awesome. Though it is sometimes a problem because I'll do demos with people and I'll open up my screen and it's logged into my my Menza account for myself and not my demo account. And I'm like, yeah, let me not show you all of this stuff about our customers.
Wrong window.
Yeah, wrong. Oops.
No, that's awesome.
Okay, well, this is a bit more of a tougher question.
Okay.
Someone lands in London, 3 restaurants. Where are you sending them?
Oh, okay. Number 1 is Baron Jack. I love it. It's Persian food.
Okay.
And it's really like, it's Classic. I love Persian food in general, but I think they have a really unique take on it. And the other is Angelina. It's Japanese Italian fusion.
Whoa.
And it's like
okay.
omakase style.
Okay.
And I at first was like, this is kind of a weird concept, but then you think about it and you're like, oh, okay, like, raw fish is something that's in both cuisines.
Yeah.
And they'll make like a tortellini that has like miso in it. Fantastic. Oh, this is so hard because I have too many restaurants that I really like.
Okay, we can bump it to 5.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I have like a whole list, by the way, that I'll send you guys later.
That's
and
the
if
plug we
anyone
need.
ever needs, with all of my reviews of all these different restaurants, I just went to Collet, and they're fantastic. And by the way, all these places do halal options.
Okay, that's awesome.
Which is great. And
Yeah.
that's what I love is like all of these restaurants. Yeah, like it's not, they don't necessarily need to be like Muslim owned to have halal food. So Collet, it's southern Thai food, and so it's a little bit different, and it's like a lot of grilled meats and stuff. And they have this like I just went there the other day, and they have this like peanutty chicken kebab thing that is so fantastic. Another one that I really
Like beef kebab?
No, like chicken
kebab. Okay,
kebab,
gotcha.
Like skewers, but like it's like satay.
Okay.
I don't know how to describe it. They have like a coconut salad that's really good. It's just like super refreshing and nice.
Yeah.
Perfect for a summer day. What else would I say? Okay, there are things that I would recommend that are like American food here that's quite fun, but there's this place called Grosso. If you live in London, and you miss American food, that's a really good one.
Got it.
It's Italian American, and they do like a massive chicken parmesan, and they do vodka pasta but without vodka, which is quite nice. Oh my god, I'm gonna regret not saying so many different things.
This was a tough question.
I know, because this is my least favorite question.
Yeah, I love Honest Burgers if you want a burger,
Ooh,
and they do their
okay.
chicken sandwiches are really nice, and I feel like it's a chain, but it's like a chain that I highly rate. Oh my God, there's Elliot's. Go to Borough Market. Like, there's so many great restaurants there. Some of the ones I've mentioned are there. Oh my God, like Oma and Akara. Oh my God, there's so many.
Okay. You're having a bad day. Where do you go?
If I'm having a bad day, I order an Honest Burger.
Okay, so that's your...
Wait, can I pull up my list?
Of course.
Because I just like...
Oh, I love your phone case.
Oh, thank
that's so
you.
Cool.
Yeah, my friend Hafsa got it for me. Thank you, Hafsa.
Wow.
Because she had the same phone case and I couldn't stop staring.
Yeah.
So I have like 3 different lists for London. I have food, I have gluten-free options, and cafes, bakeries.
Gluten-free?
Are you...
I am, yeah.
Oh my God.
I have a wheat allergy.
No way.
Which developed which is really sad. We're Texan, but...
So I don't eat gluten, or I'm trying to not. And so...
Oh yeah, you got to send me that list.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. And like the bakery scene in
I've heard.
London is fantastic. In Europe in general. And there's some amazing gluten-free bakeries here that are like genuinely really, really good. Okay, wait. Where have I been recently that I really loved? Sorry. There's
No,
so
you're
many. There's so many like great Muslim-owned restaurants as well in London. So I did a thing during Ramadan where I was like, if I'm going to go out, I need to go to a Muslim-owned restaurant.
Yeah.
So there's like really good Uyghur food as well,
Oh,
especially
nice.
in
Yeah.
Central. There's like really good desi food here as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of like Darjeeling Express.
Of
so
course.
Asmakhan.
Yes,
So that's really
so
good.
good.
If you want like no frills at all, in East London there are these 2 restaurants that are competing. So Lahore Kebab House and Tayyib's, and they're like classic like Pakistani grill food. I personally like Lahore Kebab House a little bit more. The thing is, like, you go there and you will end up with something on your table you did not order. Whether it's like an extra serving of lamb or it's someone's coat or an empty water bottle,
Amazing.
it will be on your table. Everything is served in the dish it was cooked in. And it's like they just throw it on your table. And it is all fantastic, like very home cooked style. Oh my God, there's so much. I genuinely love food here. And there's just, I would say New York is the kind of place where you can walk into anywhere and it's generally going to be pretty good. Here, it's not necessarily the same. But there are some really great options. Anything from like the JKS restaurant group as well is really good. So like Baron Jack, Bao.
Okay.
If you really fancy, Gymkhana is amazing.
Gymkhana? What cuisine
It's
is
an
that?
Indian cuisine.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like a Michelin star Indian restaurant.
Michelin star.
My colleague at IBM, his uncle's the owner. Fun fact.
Oh.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's probably one of the wildest plug that I had into the experience because when I came like 3 years ago, he was because I didn't know about Gymkhana, so
Yeah.
he was like, oh yeah, my uncle was just letting me know. I'm like, Sure. So I
You
solo
should let
dined
him-
there.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So
Did
I
you like
went.
it?
It was
Because
phenomenal.
I'm really skeptical of fancy Indian food.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and so I'm like, no way is this going to be really good.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was actually fantastic.
Yeah. I went to, for me, it was, why am I blanking out? It's in Thailand, in Bangkok. Shoot. How am I forgetting this place's name? I'm so upset. But he was on Chef's Table.
Okay.
And it was one of the first places that was like for Indian cuisine that I got a Michelin star. And his whole mindset was taking, Desi cuisine and then making it fancy for like the Michelin palette, right? And it was such a gastronomical experience. Like one of the plates that he had, it's all gel, and it says in the drawing of the gel, it says "lick it up," okay? And then there's like a tongue emoji on it. And he brings out the plate, and then the waiter will bring out a speaker, puts it on the table, and you're just like really confused. And mind you, there's like 30 other tables here, right? That's all happening at the same time. And then they press play on all the speakers and it starts playing "Lick It Up" by Kiss, the band. And then when you lick the plate, it literally tastes like, I'm not kidding you, it tastes like biryani. It is the weirdest thing in your brain that is happening.
It's interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this either.
So it was like my first time where I was like, I don't know how I feel about Desi cuisine.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, it's the show, it's the science of it, but it's also
Yeah.
the taste element too, right? So for the taste to be the same, but obviously the texture and everything's very different, it plays like a weird trick in your mind. But then his other dishes were also phenomenal, right? But for me, when I came to Desi food, it's always been like, it's very, it's very intimate. You eat with your hands.
Yeah.
It's very, like you're saying, they serve it on a plate. Like, I love that element.
Yeah.
But I feel like Gymkhana did a really good job of like balancing that. Where it's
Yeah.
like, you still have that element, but it's just more well presented.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And just it tastes amazing.
Exactly.
And, oh my God, I forgot to mention Menteca. Sorry.
Menteca,
I knew
okay.
I was going to regret.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Menteca, amazing Italian food. Their pasta is just phenomenal.
What's your go-to place for a budget? Because criticism is
yeah.
like London's expensive.
Oh, Roti King is pretty good.
Roti King?
Yeah,
Okay.
they make fresh. It's like a Malaysian place. They do fresh roti, and they have like a curry, and it's like 10 pounds.
Awesome.
And that's like really, really nice. Oh my God, I have too many.
Yeah.
I have quite a few budget ones,
No
and I'll
worries.
send you my gluten-free list. as
Yeah,
well.
just the entire gluten-free one.
Yeah.
Mariam's food newsletter.
No, but I
That's,
was definitely looking into like gluten, like in general. So I haven't been gluten-free my whole life. I
Yeah.
found out like maybe, or I developed it, like I guess it stress-induced apparently. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So from there, like it's like completely changed like my dietary,
Yeah.
and the U.S. is not as
No.
easy
But here
to-
you get a lot of
But-
completely gluten-free restaurants.
yeah, even in Europe in general. Like I remember last time I went to Spain, like there's like one of the best places.
McDonald's in Spain has really good gluten-free options.
Yeah, I think a lot of like I feel like actually Spain is like one of the like top 3 cities for gluten free. So like now I know so much more, and it's so
Yeah.
funny. Like we were like trying to walk down the street, and he got a glimpse of how hard it is to be gluten free.
Yeah.
Like you have to
Well,
ask
like,
everyone.
yeah.
People don't know what it means sometimes.
Well, it's also just like the sensitivity level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
Yeah.
true.
my
Like, how-
friend, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, how are you with soy sauce?
I can't do soy sauce. I mean, I
Okay.
can do all of it. Like I won't have like I won't end up in the hospital, but I will for sure get brain fog. I'll
No,
bloat
not
up.
worth it.
It kills my productivity levels. That's what I was telling you. I was
Yeah.
like, dude, I have to make sure. Like yesterday, I was like, I have to make sure it has no gluten in it because I'm not gonna be on game
Yeah,
for all
yeah,
these
yeah.
podcast
Where did you guys
shoots.
go yesterday?
We just went down the street at some like
Yeah, some
random
Lebanese
person.
food spot.
yeah.
Yeah,
It was more of a
which-
time thing.
Yeah, and then it was unfortunate because they put the pita bread on top of his
Oh
food.
no.
And I was like,
And
yeah,
I was
guys,
like,
I can't eat this at all. Like,
And I feel like it's tough because it comes off as like being a diva, but it's like literally a health thing for
Yeah,
you,
No,
right?
exactly.
And
Exactly.
so, but yeah, it is a challenge. One of my best friends in college, she had celiac disease, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
which is worse.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that is a huge challenge. But back then there wasn't as many options, but it's growing in terms of having
Yeah,
gluten-free
like
options.
for example, Honest Burgers, they do gluten-free burger buns, and everything else is gluten-free. So
Yeah.
like even their onion rings and
Oh,
stuff.
awesome.
Like,
We're going
yeah. Yeah, I'll go with you guys. I want Honest Burgers
Oh.
now.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
so hungry.
I'm kind of craving burgers right now, so but it could be the Texan in me to wanting it. But well, Mariam, thank you so much
Yeah,
for joining
so
us.
great
I know it's a
chatting
bit
with
of
you
a
guys.
bit of a trip to come here and
No
chat with
worries.
us, but I know it's like really meaningful for a lot of folks. Any last pitch that you want to make? before we close out?
Well, check out Menza. That's the biggest thing. If you're a consumer brand, but also follow me on LinkedIn, I guess. I try to document what we're doing because I feel like it's such a cool experience. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be a founder and just everyone I work with. So I don't know. I guess that's my plug.
Yeah, no,
Awesome.
that's awesome.
All I
Thank you
have
so-
to plug is my company.
Yeah,
Really.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. We had today Mariam Ahmed from Menza, here based out of London, here for Muslim Tech Week. So thank you so much.
Thank you.